Welcome back to the Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire. We're looking for innovative ways to get ahead of the wildfire problem. Okay, well, too late for that. We're not ahead of it, but maybe to play catch up with it and work our way out of it. But undoubtedly, to work our way out of any problem is going to require great leadership, and the leaders are going to have to possibly think differently about problems and where the solutions are going to come from. And therefore, I have Greg Zimbulis with us. And did I pronounce that right? Zimbulis, right?
Very close.
So. All right. Greg, I'm Zimbulis. Okay.
Zimbulis.
So, Zimbulis.
Zimbulis. It's scary, isn't it?
A rose by any other name would swell.
When I arrived somewhere for a job many years ago, I was very surprised when I walked in. They were expecting a big African, the name just conjured up.
Oh,
I guess with the Z, they expected a big African warrior. I was like, that's just me, a skinny little kid with a Greek name.
That is so funny. Well, if we'll stick to the easy part, Greg. Greg is an expert in leadership. I recently saw one of his videos on an alternative platform. But, we're going to be seeing more and more of him, I think, on podcasts and on LinkedIn, because that's where leaders go to get information. Greg, welcome to the Fire Break. How are you today?
Thank you, Steve. I'm great. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm very interested in the Fire Break.
So I detect that.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're interested in everything, and that's what makes you interesting.
Well, when we encountered each other, I had a look at the Fire Break, and I think it's wonderful, and I love that technology. And I'm in Australia, and as I said to you in an earlier note, it's bushfire Armageddon here most years, somewhere in our country, and I'd love to see that jet blaster sitting on the front of a fire truck, just blasting the living daylights out of a fire. I think it's wonderful.
I'm looking forward to it as well. So how did you come to develop the expertise that you hold on leadership?
Almost accidentally, I think expertise. Thank you, but I'm no spring chicken, and I think I'm in my third act of my professional life. I had my first 20 years in commercial radio around the country, having lots of fun in sales and marketing, and then kind of gravitated into some tech work. We did some database integration. I had early experience in online selling in last century. 25 years ago, we had to build everything when there were no plug-in e-commerce modules. We had to literally have everything written for us. And around 25 years ago, I began working with one of my oldest friends, a psychologist, who was building up a management consulting business. He was based on the other side of the country. I'm on the east coast of Australia. He was on the west coast, and he asked me to work with him and help him do one project. And I stayed for 20 years. And we found ourselves really focusing with his lead, because he is a psychologist. We built that business as a behavioral change business, helping organizations understand what needs to change, what they need to do differently to change the results they want. And typically, in any business, and we worked, primarily for large corporates. We were blessed in our ability to get great contracts. But invariably, the change that most businesses want is greater sales, greater profitability. It's driven by a revenue base. So by default, that led us into lots of sales and business development programs. But it was very clear early on that no matter how good a frontline program is, no matter how effectively we deliver the skills to the people doing the selling or the business development, without effective leadership, it just doesn't stick. Single interventions don't work. And over the years, it became just glaringly obvious that the real change that needs to be effected in most organizations is at the top. You need to have the skills of the people there. They need to be motivated, connected, skilled, trained, tooled, but it's the support they get. And I equate that to effective parenting. It's exactly the same. And I use parenting analogies which gets me into some trouble in the new wokeness of the world. But, leading people in business is, to me, just effective parenting, using that as a generalization. It's about three fundamental things of, having good one-on-one relationships with the people that you're influencing, being a really consistent and effective role model, and developing an appropriate team dynamic. If everything you need to do, in my view, as a leader, particularly a tactical leader, everything you need to do fits into at least one of those three categories, if not a couple. And if you can be an effective role model, having great one-on-one relationships, and bring a good team dynamic together with all of the elements that are required to actually achieve that, you're doing pretty well. And that's a good parent. Good leader, good parent. So it just kind of happened.
So for people who find themselves, some people are born into leadership, others have it thrust upon them. For those who find themselves in a leadership role and hadn't expected to be there, how do they go about developing that skill set?
Well, that's a big question, and it really depends where they are and where they've come from. And one of the great tragedies that I found, particularly earlier on, is when we were dealing with sales leaders. And the great tragedy was that so many, there are great leaders out there, of course, and people with great talent, but so many sales leaders are ill-equipped, and they've found themselves in the position of leading a sales team mainly and simply just because they've been terrific salespeople. And the progression is, well, gosh, who's going to be our next sales leader? Well, it should be our best salesperson. And what often happens there is that you lose a good salesperson and get a poor leader because the skill set is not necessarily the same. It can be, and of course there are great sales leaders who were terrific salespeople, but people don't generally seek out the people skills and the training. And I'm seeing that now as I've kind of gravitated away from the corporates. I've still got some corporate clients, but my passion has always been smaller business. And I find that in my targeting, and some of the videos you've seen are targeted to this particular audience, and that is people who have businesses. And in Australia, I look at tradespeople or contractors, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, and the world runs on small and medium businesses like that. And most of those people, I'll use an electrician as an example. If you have an electrical contracting business with 2 or 3 or 23 or 50 people there, it's likely that you've built that business from scratch. And it's likely you came from the tools. It's likely you were and are an electrician, and you've been successful, entrepreneurial, taken the risks, and had the wherewithal to turn that into a business, and they grow, and that's wonderful. And we find when people get to that level, the most advice they get is getting a good accountant. You have to have you have to have that mechanism. You've got to do your taxes, you've got to pay your bills, so you get an accountant. But you don't get much other advice. You're great on the tools, and the people, if you're natural and people gravitate towards you, that's wonderful. But knowing how to properly engage the people, knowing how to help them truly develop, knowing how to do the fundamentals of reinforcing the good behaviours, give them effective feedback, be able to correct behaviours, becoming a person in a business, becoming a person that others actually want to work for and with, and becoming an employer that other electricians want to say, I want to go and work over there because that's good. And having people that are so comfortable there that they never really want to leave. And as they say, as Richard Branson says, and then building great people in your team that others want to poach them. Do such a good job that everybody else wants to hire them, but be such a good employer that they never want to leave. So I just like working with people now, and it's the realization I've found, putting my business hat on, the deliverables for me are a no-brainer. I can see clearly, and it's really quite fundamental what needs to be done. And when I start working with people, it always works. It always works. But getting them there, dragging that horse to water to get them to have that first drink, getting to actually think that they have a leadership gap or opportunity is the big step, because they think my people need sales training. Oh, my people need motivation. My people need some cultural work. Well, yeah, maybe they do. But change starts at the top. So when you think about what you need to do, because, say leadership ain't rocket science, your actions really will make the difference. I haven't been in a business in 25 years where the issues haven't been able to be significantly improved or fixed by a change of behaviours of the leadership.
Very interesting. It sounds very much like what I read in the book, The E-Myth, right? Which is the myth is that just because you're good at a particular trade, that you would have any aptitude in running a business that performs that service, right? That being a good plumber doesn't mean that you come with any of the skills for running a plumbing company, because running a company is entirely different. And the other thing I heard you say there was talking about what happens underneath the leader, with this kind of presumption that it would be much easier to lead this company if other people would be different.
That's right.
Rather than
fixed by people.
Saying like this company will run better if I'm different.
That's
right. Fix
my
people, right? Exactly.
We there's a simple methodology now of the key steps for me when somebody says, "Oh, I think we need to change the people." Well, what is it that you want to see change? And to take a Stephen Coveyism of one of his great 7 habits is the second habit of begin with the end in mind. And it's always stumped me why that's not his first habit, but begin with the end in mind. So if you want to improve your business, if you want to improve your people, well, what's the end game? What is it that you actually want to achieve? Oh, I want to sell more. Well, what does that look like? What does that really look like? Selling more. Let's be very specific about that. Too often, people really can't. Of course, they want to grow and they want more clients and they want longer relationships, but they can't really articulate what that looks like. So that's the very first thing, that it's a bit like, if you want to get healthier. Oh, I've been through this, as an old dude, been through it a number of times, but you want to get healthier. Oh, well, good. I want to get healthier. That's my fitness regime. Well, that's not good enough. What do you want? What do you actually want? What do you want your weight profile to look like? What do you want your heart rate to be? Let's be very specific about the outcomes you want. And that's a wonderful exercise that takes some time for people to jump into it. But when they do that and they break it down, you get great clarity. And then you can go to the next step. So, well, if that's what I want to achieve, what do my people need to do differently or more effectively or more consistently to achieve that? So if it's get more sales, if it's increase our budget by 120, revenue by 120% over the next 11 months, very specific. Well, what does that look like? What calls do they have to make? What is their territory management? What's the profiling? Really chunking it down into almost micro behaviors. And that's a big exercise. And you go, gosh, now we know what levers need to be pulled. And then the next stage saying, well, if that's what they need to do, what do you need to do to drive and support those behaviors? So there's a whole lot of work in kind of deconstructing their process and getting clarity around where they want to go, what they can do, what people they've got, what their capability is, and you map all of that out, and then the steps are almost obvious. Then it becomes a no-brainer. It's kind of like a gym. If you want to go there, I want to get fitter and I want to improve my health. When you apply those steps, and then when you get into the gym, you know exactly what you need to do, and you know exactly how often you need to go, and you know exactly what to measure, because measuring inputs is what delivers the outputs. And it's, we always look at our sales results. I was at a sales meeting this morning. Today, I attended a sales meeting with one of my clients. And those meetings always, and they're good meetings, they used to revolve around our results. How did we go this week? Where are we at for the month? What's our year looking like? And that's very important. But that's all they talked about. That's all they talked about. I said, well, hang on. So Charlie's doing well and Bill's not doing so well yet. Well, yeah. So Bill, you've got to work hard. You've got to go and sell more. Well, what's Charlie doing that Bill's not? What? Well, let's have a look. Let's talk about it. And let's look at starting to measure not just the results, very important, of course, results, but let's measure the inputs. How many calls are they making? Are they effective calls? What do those conversations look like? What's his referral base? What? So we went backwards and broke that down. And now the meetings revolve more, we certainly talk about numbers, but they revolve around the actions, the behaviours, the best practice, the things that they're doing that are working, and importantly, the things they're doing that are not working. And because that third element of a good team dynamic it is a good team dynamic, and it's become much more solid in the last couple of years that I've been around their business. They're open now to saying, well, I'm having a problem with this, because they know someone else will say, yeah, I used to have that problem, this is what I do. And those conversations are fantastic. And it's the leadership that stimulates that. It's a non-judgmental way of working towards measuring performance and knowing that if you've got the right people there, people that have the ability, measuring genuine effort. It's not about win or lose, success or failure, making genuine effort. The right people making a genuine effort will get you the results. I could talk for ages.
What I'm hearing is that we can't really know if we're being successful if we haven't defined what the success looks like.
Correct.
And then we look at what are the inputs that would contribute to that outcome. And that it sounds like in the sales meeting you attended this morning, they were focusing on the results, which changes nothing, rather than under your direction, we'll focus on what were the inputs that created those results. If we want to have different results, we have to change the inputs, right? If you close 1 out of 1,000 people you talk to, well, then you better talk to 1,000 people a month if you want to get one more customer, right?
Yes,
You're looking at what are the specific behaviors.
And if you're only closing, 1 in 1,000 and you want to close 2 in 1,000 or 10 in 1,000, what do we need to look at? What's working? What's not working? Let's look at the one that you did close, and let's look at the 9,000 you're not closing and figure out why. But measuring inputs is a really, I think, important distinction, because we tend to focus on outputs. We're results driven. It's like competitive nature. But gosh, if you're an athlete and you're trying to run 100 meters in sub 9 seconds, you certainly measure that every race. But most of the measuring is on all of the conditioning and the mindset and the fitness and everything that leads to it. If all you did was measure your results, you wouldn't do very well. So it's making sure that all of those inputs are clearly and well defined, and then the measures go in there. Because what gets measured gets done. What gets measured gets improved.
I'm reminded of a coach who said the desire to win is not nearly as important as the desire to prepare to win.
Correct. Absolutely. Who said that? That's
Focus on doing the things that. Yeah, we'll look that up. I think it was a basketball coach of some time.
Well, now,
so tell me about the things.
Thanks. I'll own it. I love
okay, yeah, you can take it.
Quotes. Thanks.
Right, and it might be in the public domain now, so you can take it. So one of the things that I've encountered in the fire space as we look at the wildfire world is a general consensus that we're going to have to look at this problem a different way, and that the people who are going to have to do that different looking are the people in leadership. That we're going to have to create different types of organizations. We're going to have to analyze the problem differently. We're going to have to deploy our resources differently. And these all bring up the horrible C word, change. But change is going to have to be something that is embraced, or only people who embrace change will actually come up with successful solutions and be able to deliver them to save people and homes from burning up. So how do we, what's the impetus, right? How do we instill new leadership thinking methods, or do we not? Do we just let Darwin go to work here and say, well, the people who don't change will become obsolete and they'll be out on retirement, and the newer, better thinkers will take their place? Or can we transition them into being better leaders for specifically this purpose?
We apply a particular philosophy around change. The old concept of change management. But we do talk to leaders about not the broad change management, but managing change and actually taking some charge of the change that you want to see. So if that's in a business or in a cohort, it might be with the public, it might be with your followers, it might be with your employees, it might be with your customers. Culturally, and at the very first time that I experienced the application of this and the evolution of this, it's a model, a simple model, was with one of a bank here in Australia. One of it, we have the big four or big five banks in Australia, and this was one of them that we applied this model and process to, and it was really effective, and I've just stuck with it because it's so simple. I won't go through the whole model, but it's based first on, if you want people to change, they have to want to change, and the best way to do that is to get them to own the problem. So instead of me coming to you and saying, you need to do this differently, it's a more circuitous approach where saying, how are we going at the moment? What does life or business or the situation look like? How could that be better? And get them to start owning that, because if they can start to see a way that could be better or more effective or more productive, well, we should be doing this, because people love to point particularly up. You need to change this. The company needs to do this differently. The leaders need to do this. You all need to do that. That's right. So what would that look like? What would you do? That's right. We do need to do that. Probably some of it, maybe not all of it. And what can you do? And if you can get and say, well, I think I should be doing that, with the right conversation, with generally the right people, you can get people to the point where they say, what I need to do is this. And when you get somebody saying, what I need to do is this, they own the change because they've owned the situation. They feel empowered, and the challenge for leaders and the successful leaders know how to bring their people along to get them to feel quite legitimately, it's not manipulative, it's legitimate, that they're saying, well, I can influence this. And if I can influence this from my space, with my leader supporting me, then we've got a chance. And the leader's going, great. So instead of telling someone what to do, it almost is just as simple as ask, not tell. Ask the right questions and they will come up with the answers, and then turn the flame up or down, turn the heat up or down on their responses, direct them in a certain way, but let them make the choices, because people will only do willingly that which they truly value. So if you want change to happen, get them to value it. And the example, if I may, that I used, the most rudimentary example that I used in workshops years ago, but I've stopped using it now because the child I'm about to talk about, who was 14 at the time, is now 31. He's my son. And I used to say, as an example of getting people to own the situation and place value on things, is that this kid, this 12, 13, 14-year-old boy, same as every boy, had a very messy room. Like, his room was just such a pile of rubble that we gave up. And I would get very, very annoyed and uptight about it. My wife would say, don't sweat the small stuff. So we, in fact, just ripped the carpet out of his room because it had actually tiles underneath it. So I was sick of wet towels being left around, clothes, and we just shut the door. Thought, oh, to hell with it. The kid's an adolescent, he'll grow out of it. It's not the end of the world. Does that sound typical, do you think? I mean, most parents will relate to that to some degree. I could not get him to clean his room.
From you to Stephen Covey.
Right. I would go in there and I'd say, son, there's a hamper. Put your clothes in there, please. No. Put wet clothes in there. And he would look at me and he'd say, he wasn't game to say it at 14 years of age, but I could see the message in his eyes was, if it's so damn easy, Dad, why don't you do it? And I was thinking, well, that was his message. He's a kid. He was a rebellious 14, so we just gave up on it. Until one day, and he was about 15, I walked past his room, I looked in, and I thought he'd moved out. I thought he'd left. And as I went in, I found that he'd sort of straightened up the cover on the bed, and all the clothes were piled in the hamper, and he'd made a reasonable effort at tidying his room. And I thought,
what's her name?
I went upstairs to my wife and said, what's going on? What do you mean? Oh, I'll use his name, he won't be happy. James's room is all clean. He's got some friends coming around. Girls, one or two. It was as
There you
simple as
go.
that.
That's
It's
why I
not
said,
that he
"What's her
didn't
name?"
know how to do it. And it's not that
Yep.
he didn't really, not that he didn't
Right.
want to do it. He just had no purpose in doing it. As soon as he had reason, as soon as it was important to him,
Yeah.
as soon as he valued the outcome, he made the effort. Not so hard. And I've never
I see.
forgotten that. If
Right.
you can connect, the outcome that people want with the change that's required. Some people, some of the feedback I get from the short posts I've done around this topic is, gosh, that's so manipulative. Well, if you want to be cynical, I don't think it's manipulative. I think it's tapping into people's own desires. And if you can make that connection, well done.
Right. And then ultimately they're happier because they're achieving something that's important to them.
Yeah, I mean, people don't work hard, for a boss because it's important to the boss. I mean, they might like to please him. People's biggest self-interest, people's biggest interest is self-interest. We are all, it's just natural and it's not a bad thing. Self-interest is the primary driver. We care about ourselves and our own. The thing that's deepest rooted in all of us is our own beliefs, our own family, our own well-being, and of the people we care about. And everything needs to feed that. And, if you recognize that, and we can help people make a connection between doing well at work will help you give your family a better life, that's not manipulative. That just seems to be logical. And how is that going to work for you? How can we help you do that? Seems to be a straightforward path. But, it sounds simple on paper.
So I would imagine that most people in fire leadership, are motivated because they want to help save lives or keep people's homes from burning down.
Yeah.
Or if, they're political appointee, to get reelected or whatever it is, but the outcome has to be the same, that, there's less fire damage. And then you come up against the inertia. Well, why would we try that machine? That, we've always done it this way, or why would we outsource that? We've always done it in-house, or right? How do you address? So I guess what you would say is you would have to show them the benefit to them of trying something new, and that
Yeah,
they would have to
and
perceive that benefit is so large to overcome inertia.
and again, I mean, I've never sold firefighting equipment, but I have worked with teams that have sold industrial equipment and large ticket items and things that I didn't understand. And the fundamentals to me are still the same, and it kind of goes back to almost to sales 101, and that is, understanding your customer. So if you've got somebody that you want to make a decision to go down a different path, to try new solutions, to buy new equipment in medical, to try new therapies, it's really about understanding them and what they're trying to achieve. So they will do it because it satisfies their needs. And if their needs are to come in on budget, or to be innovative, or to actually do the best by the community, or to save more lives, because we assume all of that. We assume that that every doctor is there because, they want to make money and they want to save lives. Well, there's a whole range of things that drive doctors' behaviours. There's a whole range of things that drive administrators' decisions. There would be a lot of things that drive firefighters and administrative firefighters and the people making those decisions, what's really important to them. And what they say and what we assume is not always the case. We're fickle people, humans, and we're a closed book often. And what we're saying is not always exactly, and mostly not exactly what we're not thinking, not what we're thinking. It can be aligned, but people don't bear all. And gosh, if they did, selling things would be really easy. If you could tap into their brain and, find out exactly what's really important to them, what's influencing their decision, then job's done. But we don't work that way when we communicate. We can be evasive. We can have so many factors that drive our conversation. So the answer to the question is really, in the basics, is understanding where they're at, doing your best to understand what's truly important to them. Why would they want to make this decision? I mean, you'll look at it and, I've been there, when you're trying to sell something, I think, God, this is the best thing in the world. You're crazy not to buy it. Well, that's what I think. Now I've got to get you to that point. And there's a whole lot of different stuff going on in your head. You've got history, you've got budgets, you've got incumbent relationships, you've got other people around, you've got so many things influencing you. So we need to navigate our way through that, and we need to do that in a timely fashion. We don't have 30 years to build that understanding. It might be over, if you're in transactional sales and you're at the local flea market trying to sell a purse to someone, well, put them in a headlock and tell them how good it is. But for most of us, it's not that transactional sale, it's relationship selling. So we need to figure out how much time we've got and truly get to know people, because ultimately, there's fit for purpose in what you're selling. It's got to satisfy the technical aspects, it's got to do the job, it's got to suit the budget, they've got to actually have the money to do it. But they also have to feel right about it. It has to satisfy their emotional needs. Some people are far more emotional in those considerations than others, and that takes some understanding and getting to know. And that's why, as we talked about earlier, the more curious you are, the more you learn about what's important to people.
What are some of the ways that you use your curiosity to both to satisfy its own desire and to advance the purpose of your client or your sales call? Or
I've got to say, I wish I really understood this when I was a young single man, because it would have been so much easier to get a date if I'd understood some of these fundamental things. I mean, as I say, I'm not a slow learner, I'm a late learner. And some of these fundamental things about understanding what's important to other people in the personal relationship stakes would have been very powerful. So the short answer to that is to be curious and to be genuinely interested in what you're doing. So, if I was trying to sell a phone to someone in a retail store or in a corporate sense, I would, of course, need to know about my product intimately. I have to know all about it. But if all I do is start talking about how great it is, I don't really know how it fits your needs. So I need to know that, park that knowledge, and then focus on you. If I want you to buy a new phone, hopefully you're in the market. Hopefully you've put your hand up and said, I'm thinking about a new phone. So that's good news. Well, poor salesman, and I'm using quite rudimentary example, poor salesman will tell you about how great the phone is. Great salesman will ignore the product and focus on you and find out why you want a new phone. What's wrong with the one you've got? What do you do with it? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? What do you use it for? It's not just a phone these days. And how important is the status of it? Because my brand is a great brand, or it might not be a great brand. Is status important too? So the way, in answer to your question, the way to use, that craft is to be curious and ask great questions, and to ask great questions and register what people are saying. And as we say, drill down. When I say, well, how do you use your phone? Oh, I use it to send texts and make phone calls. Well, go again. Well, that's great. So what, more texts than phone calls? And you use those texts for work? And really open it up. Now, you've got to find that balance, because if if it's close to a transactional sale and you're in a store, people are thinking, gosh, you're very nosy. But there's a balance there in relationship sales. And if you're talking about firefighting equipment, of course, there's a whole stack of stuff, a lot of moving parts that you need to navigate your way through. But to me, in those sort of sales, in business to business sales, they are truly relationship sales. And people like to buy from people that they're comfortable with. This is not the same in every part of the world. Certainly it is in Australia and New Zealand because of our nature. We're pretty easygoing. Americans, I think, very close to that. Whereas some European countries, and even in Britain to a certain degree, there are a number of other factors. In some countries, of course, you won't buy from someone just because of who they are. In Australia, we're at the other end of the scale. We will buy from you if you know what you're doing, if the product works, and we feel comfortable with you. There's no class-driven society. I don't think Americans are very far away from that at all. So establishing that relationship, because, you know, for most products and services, you're not the only game in town. And you're probably not the cheapest and don't want to be. Then you think about that. Gosh, if you're selling vacuum cleaners or Xerox machines, or cell phones, there's lots of options. So it's got to be fit for purpose. It's got to. But what really is going to make the difference is that relationship you have with the person that's buying from you. And I'm sure that you, in your experience, you pay more than you would pay in other places, simply because you're more comfortable doing business with them. You feel better about it. The brand suits, or it's more convenient, or you just want to show some loyalty. You're not going to pay 10 times as much, but, you know, here we'll pay 50 cents more for a cup of coffee in the morning because we like the people we buy it from, or it's more convenient, or it's just our loyalty. Or someone says, oh, coffee's 50 cents cheaper over there. Yes, but I like it over here. Well, that's just a relationship that's built. And they'll put the price up another 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 cents, and you'll still buy from them. You don't have to discount to keep the business. It's the relationship. And that comes from understanding your customer, understanding your clients, to know what's truly important to them, collectively and individually. So the answer to that question is be curious and ask a lot of questions and pay attention to what they say.
So you say be curious, as if curiosity isn't an innate aspect of yourself that you possess or don't. As parents, you know, when I think about what is it that I would like my kids to inherit, it would be curiosity and persistence. To what degree can we influence the existence of those traits in other people?
I think it's quite situational. It depends on you and the other people. But the same way that I think you can influence the traits in people in any aspect, and that is to demonstrate it, is to role model it, is to be the way you want other people to be. You know, I guess it almost goes into do unto others, but be unto others as you want them to be. And if you're curious, if you're genuinely interested and friendly, that's the best way to demonstrate it. But there is a hesitation, and particularly in sales. And I work with salespeople, and they say, "Oh gosh, I can't ask them all those questions. I mean, some of my customers will be a bit standoffish about it." So, well, ask permission. Tell them. Well, say, Bill, you know, look, you're looking for a new photocopying machine, and we've got a new range there. Yeah, well, how much is it, and what's its rate? You know, how much does it weigh, and what's your service? So, well, I'd be happy to tell you all about that, because we've got the best machine in the world. But before I do, I want to find out a little bit more about how you actually use the machine you've got. What? Well, we use it. No, Bill, the more I know about how you use your machine, what's working for you and what your challenges are, the better equipped I'm going to be to give you the right solution that I've got. The more I know about where you're at and where you want to be, the better equipped I'm going to be to get it right, because I've got a lot of machines here. I don't want to be flogging you one that's not the right one. So is it okay if I ask you a lot of questions so I get it right? What are they going to say? If you use your own language around that, and it's very honest, and it gives you the confidence, and they go, "Well, of course you can ask me questions." Well, I double down, say, no. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. In fact, I'm going to ask you so many questions that at some point in the next 15 minutes, you're going to say, "Gosh, Greg, why do you need to know that? You're a bit nosy. You really want to know about how many of my support staff use the machine?" Yep. You really need to know all of that. So yeah, as I said at the beginning, I put the umbrella up that I raised earlier. I put the umbrella to shield me. As I said at the beginning, the more I know about how you use your photocopier and what you're looking for, the better equipped I'm going to be to get it right for you. So yeah, I'm going to be a bit nosy. And when you get that language right in your own style, I don't use my words, and you get comfortable with it because it takes a bit of confidence, what message is that sending to the person that you haven't even started selling to yet? What are they thinking about you?
They're thinking this person really wants to help me solve my problem.
Yes, they're thinking a whole stack of things. They've done this before. They know what they're talking about. They're genuinely interested. They want to get it right. Sure. And they'll say, "Oh, you're trying to sell me something?" Of course I am. I'm trying to sell you a photocopier because you want one, but I want to get it right. Oh, and people, some people, "Oh, I can't say that and I can't ask all that. I can't be that nosy." Yeah, you can. In your own way, find your way to do it. And that's the skill, because people will, in the main, there'll always be exceptions, but if you're taking that much interest in someone, they're going to respect it. It's like going to your doctor. "Oh, doctor, I've got a headache. Give me a pill. Give me the pill to get rid of it." All I want is the pill. Well, if your doctor did that, he's not much of a doctor. The doctor should be saying, "Well, I will take the pain away as best I can, but first, let's have a good once-over. Let's find out what's going on. Let's dig down." Duty of care. So I think if I was selling equipment to somebody that was in the market for equipment, I have a duty of care to make sure I'm addressing those needs properly.
Very, very interesting. And in the process of exploring what the need is, you happen to build the relationship as well, which
Yes,
puts you into
we
the
talk
know,
a lot
like,
about
and trust
questions.
category.
Steve, when people ask questions, you think, "Well, I ask a question to get an answer." Well, when you ask a question, if it's a good question, and there are some bad questions, but if you ask a good question, you get information. But too often we think about ask and answer, two-dimensional. The fact is that when you ask really effective questions, it does so much more than just give you data. Asking a great question sends messages. So you can send a message to somebody by asking questions. Said, "I can tell you how great I am. I can tell you how much experience I've had. I can tell you how much I care. I can tell you all that in 30 seconds," and you'll go, "Yeah." Or I can have a conversation with you about your need and ask really insightful questions. Use the research that I've done before I got here. Demonstrate my interest, my enthusiasm, my true knowledge. And at the end of it, you'll be thinking, "He knows his stuff. He is really good. He is really interesting." I didn't tell you that. I demonstrated it virtually exclusively by asking the right questions. So asking questions does so much more. It sends so much more than it receives. Don't think about just what you get from a good question. Think about what you send to the other person with really good questions. I love that aspect of getting people that we work with, that leadership, sales, business, anything. When the penny drops, when they go, "I get it. Now, how do I do it? But I get it. That makes so much sense." That's wonderful, because that's a pivot point in anyone's development. And as they say, awareness precedes all learning. So when you're aware of that, now I've got an appetite to want to do something about it. But if you start by trying to get people to do that without them recognizing how valuable it is, again, they don't own it. They won't change because they don't own the desire to change. I have so much fun.
It's so interesting. Yeah, so much fun. So when you have a new client, I would imagine that one of the things that they're thinking is, "Well, what does Greg know about my business?" Rather than how is my business very similar to all the other businesses that Greg has worked with, and they think that, you're like, "Well, you don't know. What do you actually know about copiers, or what do you know about the banking business, or whatever?"
Or what do you know
not realizing that
I had this instance 11 years ago when I started working for consulting to a big business that sold things to cardiologists, stents, catheters. They were selling to, their sales team were actually selling to interventional cardiologists, and the sale was made in the cath lab during the procedure. And the first question they asked me was, "What do you know about any of this?" "Oh, nothing. I don't know anything about this. But I do know about people." And it was interesting. And of course, there was a leap of faith from the CEO of that business, and we came recommended because of work we'd done in another industry. But, that didn't take long at all, because I didn't have to be an expert at cardiology. I had to understand the lingo, and I had to learn quite a bit, but I didn't have to do that. I just had to understand how to communicate with the people that were selling there, and it was the same. It's the same as if you're selling home loans. It's the same if you're selling commercial equipment. It's the same fundamentals. There are some differences, but 85% of everything we deliver for leadership or sales or business development is fundamental and works everywhere. Works everywhere. It'll work in raising a family. It'll work in selling stuff to cardiologists. It'll work selling to dentists. Works everywhere.
Right. So you're a people developer first.
Well, it's all people stuff.
Leads to them being better salespeople, better leaders, having larger organizations, being more successful.
It's all people stuff. And interestingly, when we go into a business and they say, oh, we have massive training in this business, and all of the training is on the tools. It is very technical. It's about the product, the photocopier sales. Oh, we train our salespeople. And what I found is that they trained them on the photocopier. They knew these things inside out, as most people do, as did the people that were selling stents to doctors. They knew this product. That's great. But they didn't know how to communicate. They didn't know how to say they didn't know. They weren't highly effective at communicating, asking the right question. None of them were ignorant. They're all pretty educated people. But they didn't consider that you think about soft skills. Well, these are not soft skills. These are people skills. And they are universal and they're very powerful. Gosh, it's how we've survived for hundreds of thousands of years on these fundamental skills, understanding people's desires and satisfying them or not, and bonding with others. It's very much relationship stuff.
Well, you happen to bring up one of my favorite subjects, which is how successful skills are tied to evolution, and that we are the descendants of the people who knew how to fight the tiger because we knew how to cooperate with other people to solve a problem that was bigger than any of us could solve individually. And I think that people may underrate, the evolutionary value of what you're teaching. That these are skills that they genetically possess because their ancestors did.
Look, it's human nature, and we can easily relate to the fight or flight feeling, but there are so many more, not necessarily complex, but there's so many other levels to human interaction. I'm not a psychologist, but I do appreciate the fundamental psychology of, people, the way they feel, the words they use, the symbols that represent where they're at and where they're going. All of these things are important, and you're quite right. I mean, evolution is the result of the application and the success and failure of all of those interactions. I mean, in evolution started off with animals walking up to other animals being friendly until they realized that animal, took a while to realize that animal wants to eat me. So, we want to bond with people, but you can't walk up to in the animal kingdom, you can't walk up to everyone and think they're all going to lick you and be friendly. Some of them will, and some of them will want to eat you. And evolution works that out for us. And that's why there are so many, it's interesting, that's why there's so many timid animals.
Some of them just want to lick you so they can find out if you're... Say that again?
Well, timid animals in the jungle. I mean, you walk through the jungle or you walk through the forest and animals run away from you. Why is that? Well, evolution has taught them that I'm bigger and I'm likely to cause them some damage, but some won't. Like a snake won't. I'm a lot bigger than a snake, but a snake's not going to back off. And I think that's fascinating. And I'd like to say it's human nature, but it's animal nature. And I've never thought of it in an evolutionary sense, but I like the way you think about that.
And you're right also that some people bear more commonality in their behavior to snakes than to other humans.
Of course. Well, we're all different. And there's a lot of good and a lot of not so good in the world, sadly.
Yeah.
But in business.
So tell me what the process. I know we just have a few minutes left, but I'm curious to know about the process by which you engage with your clients. What does that look like?
Well, interestingly, in 24 or 25 years of consulting and doing this, and certainly in the last 7 years since I left I was a partner in a larger group, and now I work by myself with clients and I'm busy. All of the process is really been quite straightforward. All of my business comes from referrals, every piece of it. Either referrals, or I work with people I've worked with before who might have been a sales manager or a salesperson 10 years ago, and now they're a sales director there or in another organization, or they're a CEO somewhere. And those connections, we just continue those relationships. So people have a genuine understanding. Sometimes there are new people in the mix, and the process has to be firstly them understanding that they have a need. But it's their need. They have a perceived need. You can't walk into a business and say, I can do all these great things to you. They go, what? It has to start from their perceived need. So somewhere along the line, they put their hand up, or someone says to them, or I get a call, or someone says, go and talk to so-and-so because they're interested in this. If they're interested in selling more, or they've got some issues with their team, or they just, the concept of leadership has now raised its head and they hadn't thought about it before. Great. The conversation, the process there is, what do you want to change? What do you want to see? Begin with the end in mind. What are you trying to achieve? You don't want to be just a better leader for fun. Or do you? Is the outcome you want? I want to be the greatest leader in the world. Well, okay. But usually it's more tangible than that. I don't really need to be a better leader, but I need to keep my people longer. My people are being poached, or I've got a cultural issue, or, I've got some people that just aren't working as well as they could be with others. Great. Let's talk about what that is. And, I find that I learnt this from a master salesperson and psychologist who I've known for a very long time. If you start with that, and generally if you start that on a whiteboard by mapping out everything that you need to see happen, and you put that on a whiteboard, and I ask you the right question, and you're going, yeah, and I say, well, is that what you want? Yeah. Well, and if we could do that, yeah, that's, oh gosh, you could do that? Yep. Okay. Tell me your problems. I can't teach you how to make a better photocopier. But if it's around all of the people stuff, the behavioral stuff, the sales stuff, the leadership stuff, I can actually help you improve all of those things. And when they see it on a whiteboard, that's my problem. That's the solution. And they say, can you do that? Yep. Great. So the process is getting people to own the situation. Again, we practice what we preach. And the other thing is, because we do a lot of sales programs and leadership of salespeople, the way that I would pitch or navigate my way through early discussions is truly reflective of the process that I teach. It's the same way. I mean, I role model it. People often have said to me later on, I said, we like the way that you actually approached us. And if our people could be selling that way, that would be terrific. So great. To me, that's just, I don't know any other way. And if I can't find a need there, gosh, I'm not going to go and try and sell my services, or I don't have a solution to sell because there's nothing that needs fixing or doing. So the process again is understand what they need, help them recognize that, and then match up what I do to fit that. And it doesn't always fit. We can't always, sometimes leaders aren't willing to make the change, and it's just not worth the tears and the heartache to try and do it. If they're not willing to change, I just want you to teach my salespeople. Well, we've got to do some leadership. No, just our salespeople. No, we're good with it. Won't do it. Can mostly turn them, but gosh, why would I do that? I set myself up for failure. Without leadership, without good parenting, it's like parenting. You can't send your kids out, have them trained externally, and then bring them back into a horrible environment where things haven't changed or those behaviours are poor, and expect the poor little kids to actually thrive. Not going to work. Same in business. The environment's very important.
Right. I've seen exactly what you're talking about, right? And there's behavioral problems with a kid, and they want to send them to a therapist and say, fix my kid.
And some of that, and there's certainly value in that. Parenting. Yeah, there's value in that. We quite often do need that external advice, but you can't abrogate your whole responsibility to to the school teacher or the therapist.
Right.
I mean, it's, you know, you might need that help from the therapist or a psychologist or professionals, but you have to own the journey. You're the parent. You've got to take the lead. And it's interesting, the comments, many of the comments I've got from my social posting blitz at the moment, more than half of the comments, and a lot of them, are not from leaders. They're from people saying, yeah, this is my boss. I did, 5 red flags of poor leadership. And I was inundated with people saying, yeah, my boss is 4 out of 5 of those. Oh, my boss is 6 out of 5 of those. You missed one. Red flags, people complaining about that. God, I think, gee, it's a bit sad. But so many people dissatisfied with their leaders.
How many leaders wrote to you and said, I saw myself in 4 out of those 5 things, or 3 out of those 5 things.
Quite a few.
I recognized.
Yeah. Quite a few. It's interesting to see what they'll do about it.
Well, I'm going to raise my hand, as one of them. So.
Well, great. That awareness,
very inspirational.
To me, that's a mature thing. I mean, I have deficiencies, and when you can recognise them, the older you get, the less you know. When I was 24 is the age of know-all. When you're growing up, by the time you get to 24, I think at 24, you know everything there is to know in the world. You can't tell a 24. You said I'm a bit harsh, but you can't tell a 24-year-old.
Those were the days.
They've got it all worked out. And then when you get to 30, you think, maybe there's a couple of things. And you get into your 40s, you think, a bit to know. Let me tell you, when you're in your 60s, you realise you know nothing. There's so much more to learn. And it's an interesting peak and then dip. But when people say, yeah, I've got stuff I want to do, that's the start point. Fantastic. Well, let's have a look at what that is and, read a book, get some advice, get some help, or just think differently about it. You've got to think differently before you act differently. And that's that change of mindset, that recognition that, I've got some gaps. First step. It's like alcoholism. I'm not an alcoholic. But what's the first step is, admitting that you have a problem. And the same if you want to change anything. Like, you'll never lose weight or get fitter until you say, I have a problem. I'm overweight, or I'm unfit, or I want to be a better leader. I have a gap. I recognise I have a gap, and I need to figure out what it is and how to work on it. That's half the battle. That's half the battle. You don't give up the booze until you recognise that you've got a problem with it. Human nature.
Fascinating.
Wow. Leaders are
I'm completely fascinated by what you do.
Thank you.
By your process, the whole subject matter. How do we change ourselves so that we can have a better influence on what's around us? Not how do we change the world to suit us?
Yeah. Yep. I think that's.
Although, if you have ultimate power over everything, you don't have to worry about that. But most of us don't.
Wish we did. It'd be great, wouldn't it? But who would have
interesting.
That?
Well, I will post links.
Which of us would be the ones to have that ultimate power? If it's not me, it won't work. Yeah. That's right. How we all think.
Right. Yeah. Power over ourselves, right? And that's great. Well, I will certainly post links here on the Firebreak page to all of your materials as you post them. And,
thank you. And a book. There's a great book.
Encourage people who.
There's a great book. A simple book I wrote. I didn't come to tout my book, but it is Leadership to Make Things Happen, and it's really a tactical thing around those 3 pillars that I talked about of role modelling and one-on-ones and team, and I found that to be a really effective start point for people. So link to that. It's on Amazon.
We'll discuss your book on our next interview together.
Well, I'll certainly send you one, Steve. You can read it between the office and the car. It's a short read, but it's really powerful.
It's just the neighbors prefer that I not read while I'm driving, but maybe
I say to people say, I want your book, and anyway. 2 weeks later I say, have you read it? Oh, I haven't yet. I said, it's 112 pages. How long can it take you? I mean, seriously, if you want to read it, just read it. Read it on the way to the car.
Yeah, right.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Wonderful.
Been
Greg,
great
thank
talking
you.
to you.
Thanks so much for a really fascinating hour. Huge fan of what you're doing and how you're helping people
Thank you.
that come to you because they want help to improve themselves and their organizations. Greg Zimbulis, please follow, link, or whatever the things that we're supposed to do with people who you
All of
think
it.
will help you. And we'll post those links right here. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you very
Greg,
much.
for this
Thank you,
time.
Steve.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining me for another hour of The Fire Break. We're sponsored by Team Wildfire. Check us out on the web at teamwildfire.com, where you'll find a link to this podcast. Talk to you soon, and we'll see you at the next one. Take care.